Well, I'm sure everyone needs a moment to collect themselves after that. We're among the first people in Australia to get on the Zola journey, which is very exciting. I couldn't wait to see it and to include it in the program. And I'm even more excited to welcome the director, Janix Brava, to the festival, albeit virtually. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to the power of the unofficial sponsor of the Sydney lockdown, Zoom.
I think Zoom probably sponsored the last 15, 16 months of our lives, no?
Yeah, we should all have shares in Zoom, I'm sure.
Or be collecting like some like advert coin.
Right, exactly. The affiliate program. Yeah. How has it been like what's it been like to release your film during a pandemic? That must be pretty wild.
Yeah, so I was going to release this film a year ago at around this time. In the States, it was coming out at the bottom of June, top of July of 2020. And then there was the year that happened, which I'm sure you noticed. And so here we are, 1 year later. And we're getting to come out in the same window that we were looking at in the States, that is in North America, bottom of June, top of July. It feels a bit, I wish I had, I there's so many things it feels like, right? I feel free. I feel I can feel the release. I mean, I know we're talking about the film's release, but my own release, right? I think my body was tight and congested and a bit sour. I was unhappy. I had spent over a year mourning what I thought could have been. And so to be here now in this moment, I'm not sure that I'm totally as present as I thought I might be. Like it almost feels a bit unreal. I think I'm also afraid to enjoy it too much. Like if I enjoy it too much, someone's going to hear and then it's all going to go away. So I'm trying to move through it really sort of quietly and timidly. But I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that people are getting to see it in the theater. This feels like a movie to watch in the theater, at least for your first time, right? I think we're all used to watching things at home on our phones. And after, a year, at least in the country that I'm in, I am in Los Angeles, after over a year of so much watching on television, there is something super magical about getting to go back to the movies. You kind of forget how special that was. You forget how you hadn't necessarily appreciated something that feels so small.
That tingly feeling.
Yeah, getting to be in community with strangers, right? And hearing the stray laugh or hearing the groan or hearing the pleasure or displeasure, like being able to share that in community is a gift.
Yeah. And that's what we love about the festival as well. So that's really nice. And watching the kind of press tour unfold and be documented on Instagram has been lots of fun too. It's clear that you and your co-writer Jeremy O'Harris, as well as the cast, have a really tight bond, and it's the sort of thing that only happens after a life-changing experience. So I want to know, how you found your team, how you brought everyone together. And I know there's a really great story about how you found your Zola, Taylor Page. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. I mean, gosh, there are like 30 different groups of people to talk about. So I'm going to narrow it down. Taylor, everyone just saw the movie. Taylor Page plays Zola. We had looked at about over 700 women. This was an open casting call, and that just means that we had spread our net wide. And I was interested in, I thought there was a potential here with this part to cast someone who was unheard of, or a discovery, right? Like there's room to make a discovery here. And so because of that, our net was super wide. That meant I was trolling Instagram, like going on these like Instagram wormholes, sending a person to my casting director, send her the monologue, she should read it. I turned the first, I think 20 to 30 tweets into a monologue, which with some massaging, I turned them into a monologue. And so we would just send them to random girls. I think we also had signs up at like a coffee shop in, you know, the middle of the country. And we even had people audition outside of the US, but I felt pretty dedicated to casting an American actress just because like of the language of it. And I I think we're months into casting, and I should preface by saying when we started talking about Zola, I had mentioned to my casting director, there's this girl, I saw her on television in like an ad for I think 20 seconds. I don't know her name, but she was great. She dances, she's black, and my casting director looked at me as if I'd said nothing because that wasn't incredibly specific. So we're months into looking for Zola. And I'm sitting at this coffee shop in LA, and Taylor walks in, and I'm like, oh my God, that's her. That's the woman I saw 20 seconds of on TV. And I take out my phone, and it doesn't look like this. This is pretty large, but I take out my phone and I like snap a couple pictures of her, which she notices and makes some real stank face at me about. And as she should. And I was like, that's the perfect face. I love this stank face. This is great. And I sent her to my casting director, and she goes, oh, Taylor Page. Yeah, I know her. And she comes in and she reads, and it's done. I think by the time she's reading, we've now seen close to 800 people, and she's the one.
Wow, amazing. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. The cast seems to have bonded very, very well, and there's definitely chemistry just popping off the screen. Was there a long rehearsal process? How did you achieve that? How did you manage to pull that off?
So chemistry is such a good word. And I think that sometimes there isn't enough consideration around the chemistry between two women, right? Or the chemistry between friends. And I say in this story, it's two women in the world, friends, meaning like, even if it's platonic, I think you want there to be energy, right? Like some kind of energy where you are like, and some of that energy can be a little bit sexual, right? It can be something that looks a little horny. Even if it's not that, because that's, you look into someone's eyes and you see yourself and you want to share your whole world with them. That's a little bit sexy. And there was the chance of, I wrote the part, when writing the part with my co-writer Jeremy O'Harris, the person at the top of my mind was Riley Keough. I hadn't really shared that with anyone. I kind of kept that close to the vest. And by the time we were casting, I was like, she's my first choice. That's who I want. And, but we did our due diligence because she was somebody we had to make an offer to. She wasn't going to audition. And so we did our due diligence. We met other women, and I liked them, but I was like, no, there's this thing that she just has, and she is totally fearless, right? She was a totally fearless performer. And Riley is my favorite kind of actor in that she says yes first and asks questions later. And I couldn't have really asked for a better dynamic between the two of them, right? It's sort of a chance that they would make sense. And then they made so much sense that they're really close. I mean, they're best friends and they hang out all the time. And during production, they slept in bed together. They had sleepovers like every weekend. They rode bikes together. They would like talk in like whispered sounds with each other. And it was really beautiful. And I think that if the movie has done anything, it made two friends, and that's really awesome. I love that.
I mean, it shows and it's fun to watch. And then, so now going back to the source material, the Thodacy, which I love that it's named that, it deserves the name like that. This story was incredible, and we're seeing lots of, inclusion of social media or reference to social media in film and television, but you've gone that next step and you've chosen a story that came out of social media. What attracted you to the story, and why did you want to bring it to life on film?
I have heard some people say that this is the first film based on a Twitter thread. I'm not comfortable saying that because I don't know that that's true. It might feel true. Maybe it's the first to have this scale of reception. Perhaps there's one before us. I fell in love with it because I fell in love with the text. I hadn't even considered that no one's ever done this before, or if they had, like no one had ever done it with the potential for. I just, none of that was in the mechanics of how I arrived at it. And so much of what pulls me to the work that I want to make is my gut. My gut kind of speaks for me. And as I was reading it, my gut, there was like my gut, and then some kind of like a sort of sky opening moment. And I know this sounds like, a little sort of goofy, and I'm not like a hippie or anything like that, which is also fine, but something kind of celestial happens that is like, this is supposed to be your next movie, and I just knew that or felt that. And whether or not it was going to be true, I felt destined to like claw after it and try to make it mine. And it wasn't something so there wasn't a chess piece in mind. It was, I just have to make this. And there are a multitude of reasons why I feel I have to make this. I love this voice. I want to take care of this woman. I want to protect her. I have never seen a character like this before. I mean, I've seen versions of a character like this. Like, in fact, when I was starting to do my homework on the film, once I finally got it, I had asked a lot of my collaborators if they could reference a movie or movies in which they had seen a Black female protagonist who had a good deal of agency and was also comfortable in her sexuality. And people found themselves in the should I do that more? And what the only person that came to mind for me was Pam Grier in her series of blaxploitation films. That was the only time I'd ever seen a Black woman be powerful and also sexy and sexual. And that the way she was using sex, or the way that she was comfortable with sex, was never to demean her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I realized I talked for so long, so I'm just going to stop speaking now.
Well, you answered the question thoroughly.
Okay, great.
And I think what I'm getting there is that it was a lot of instinct. You read it and you knew you had to do it, and you thought that you could treat it, right. And that, I guess, that instinct kind of filters through to some of the other choices you probably made in the film. Like, being that it's set in 2015, it has a very specific aesthetic, it's this perfect little time capsule, from the production design, the wardrobe, the vernacular, like the works. And I just wonder if you ever approached it as a bit of a period piece.
1,000%. I mean, you nailed it. It was a period piece. Also, 2015 felt like a real end or chapter close, right? Like 2016, something else happened. And at least I know in this country, something else happens. And I kind of wanted to homage that period and what felt like an end, and look at it in a time capsule. You sort of thinking about, like, when the aliens come to visit, if we only get to leave them some artifacts, and the film is one of the artifacts, how does the film tell them exactly who we were and where we were? And so to treat that year like it was a period, and in some ways it does, right? There is a kind of nostalgia just about 6 years ago. And we shot the movie in the fall, winter of 2018. And even in 2018, 2015 felt far, and it especially feels far now.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a trip down memory lane. It was a lot of fun. Actually, something that I found so triggering, but I'm so glad you included it, was that, like, that little Twitter notification whistle every time.
Does that not exist anymore? Does that not exist anymore?
Yeah, but we all keep our phones on silent. I don't have my phone. I don't hear the notifications anymore. So that was fun. I like that you included that. And what I also loved, and I'll ask you about this, is the just that kind of like Reddit clapback for Stephanie's character. I love that sequence. Why did you choose to include that? Because it could have been very easy to just tell it from Zola's point of view the whole time and have no other, perspective.
Absolutely. I think so the Twitter whistle, I'll answer the first part, or engage with the first part, is whenever a line of dialogue is exactly like it was written in the Twitter feed, the whistle is meant to homage our original text. It's meant to homage, our sort of our keeper, and that is Zola, who wrote the real, the original our Bible. And then regarding the Reddit version, I think there are a few things, right? Like I felt the movie needed to have these kind of digital gestures, these sort of conversations with what had been, right? So we're looking at, like, while it may not be the year that Twitter is born or the year that Reddit is born, those feel very much like a part of that period. Vine feels very much in that period, right? And so in my initial pitch, when I read the story first in 2015, and I had done a little bit of dramaturgical research on the real Zola and on the story, what I found was, across the board, a question of the validity of her story. And soon after her piece came out on Twitter, or she released her version on Twitter, the real Stephanie released her version on Reddit, and then the real Derek released his version on Facebook. And when you looked at all three of them together, the stories were basically symbiotic. And the thing that was different was that each person was naturally the star of their own story. And the other thing was that they had recast themselves to be not only in a position of power, but they were also in the beta position, right? Like, they were also being, like, thrust into a situation where they were being taken advantage of. And each person had done that. And so the Stephanie version, again, when I go back to all of those initial articles that questioned the validity, they kept asking, well, what about the white woman? And what about the white girl? And what about her story? And how does she feel? And so I figured some portion of the audience is going to sit down and go, but what about the white girl? And so you have the what about the white girl? It happens right inside of it. And it happens in a scene that is not in the original Twitter thread. It happens in a scene that she tells in her version, actually. That version, that sort of gangbang with Latino men, is something she writes in her Reddit piece. And it's like a gap. It takes place exactly where it is, basically, like, it's before the hotel shootout. And so when she told that, I had asked the real Zola about that, and she had not felt comfortable talking about what happened in that house. And of course, I asked for her permission to be able to include it, and she was very open and kind of, like, curious for how it would play. And so that's why, because she's the one who introduced this part of the story to me, and it's kind of a humiliating beat or a humiliating moment. And so it feels like a great place for her to take advantage of the story and make it hers to tell, or take a hold of the story.
That's really cool. I think overall as well, you showed tremendous restraint with what was a very wild story. So, and I wondered, does that have to do with, I guess what I'm trying to say is that Zola is in the moment, but she's also that one step removed from the action. And I realized what I hadn't realized from the thread is that actually she's more an observer than a participant. Like, she narrated the whole thing on Twitter, but you don't get a sense of just how, like, out of it she really was. She was almost disassociating while this was all happening. And I think you managed to show that really well. Was that something you picked up originally, or was that a creative choice later on?
It wasn't something that it wasn't something I picked up when I first read the thread, but when I started to actually work on it, right? So, like, I read this in 2015. I'm not working on it until 2017. And when I finally am, like, able to be the person that's working on it, or even in my own pitching of myself, what I realized was that this was a traumatized person processing, and that the character that's in the film is the writer Zola. It's not the Zola that's in the moment, right? It's not the Zola that was actually next to that action. It's the Zola that is now telling us about it. It's the Zola that has, like, picked herself up and plucked herself right inside of it to be right next to it, right? And even in the blocking and in the photography, she tends to be next to the action. And so that's the personality. And I think something that you picked up on, which for a lot of people, when they read the thread, I think the thread is so bombastic, so larger than life, that I think they read her as being also a mirror of that energy. And really what she wrote is a Stephanie that is out of control and a Zola that is very in control. And so that is the final manifestation, right? And I think that, like, it's one thing to read something and to color it with our own ideas, and another to actually watch it in process or watch it as a sort of like hard and tangible object. And I think once you see it, the other thing is I think how she's engaging with race, I think kind of disappears in the thread. But once you're actually looking at it, you're looking at the story of a Black woman who is seduced by a white woman into something that she doesn't want to be inside of, right? And so then almost every piece of it becomes about race when it doesn't necessarily feel that way in the red text.
Well, thank you, Janica. We've reached the end now.
Thank you. Thank
Congratulations.
You for having me. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Next time we'll welcome you in person and we'll give you
next time tour. I'm going to be with you in Sydney and you'll show me all the things.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much. Congratulations and all the best as you continue on your tour.
Thank you. Tell all your friends.